Dr. Nathan Groot. I am a music instructor at the Arkansas School for Mathematics, Sciences, and the Arts, where I teach string ensemble as well as applied string lessons and other music courses. Today we're looking at an evening song, which is part of the 2024 set for the junior high south region of the state of Arkansas. First things first, we're always going to check our key and our meter. So we're starting out looking at the time signature here. This is in 3/4, so we have 3 beats per measure, and what we're counting here are quarter notes. This is andante, and we do have a metronome marking, which is 72. Not too fast. You'll also notice in the key, we're going to have no sharps, no flats. We are looking at a 2-3 finger pattern on the G string in first position. We are looking at a 1-2 finger pattern on the D string in first position. Looking at another 1-2 finger pattern in first position on the A string. And we are looking at an open finger pattern on the E string. A little bit tricky, right? Because our F natural is going to be back, right? So we're going to be thinking about that. Now when we shift, we'll be using slightly different finger patterns, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Oddly, there's nothing written here in measure 5. This is maybe something to ask your teacher about. It's something I may ask about myself. There's no other fingering until 9, 10, 11, where we're clearly back in first position. I'm not exactly sure how the editor wants us to get back to first position. So I'm just staying up there and then shifting down on that G. So, you know, it's not ideal because we always want to follow exactly what's written. It's just that what's written here, there's a little bit of ambiguity there. One thing to keep in mind though, avoid open E's on those half notes because those will sound a little screechy. See if you can use either a second finger in third position or a fourth finger in first position if you can. Rhythmically, there's nothing super complicated here. We have quarter notes, eighth notes. The main thing that will trip people up, I would predict, is going to be the dotted quarter notes. So remember that a dotted quarter note has 3 eighth notes in it. So if we're counting, and I'll play along with a subdivided metronome, but if we're counting 1 and 2 and 3 and, we're going to be counting 1 and 2 for example, measure 3, that dotted quarter note. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2. If we were to play all the underlying eighth notes in there, it would be, right? So just keeping track really carefully of 1 and 2 and 3 and making sure that you are correctly subdividing. Try to think of the eighth notes rather than just the quarter notes. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so there are a few shifts in here, and we should follow the shifts as they're written, even if it may be possible to play this without shifting. They're written in there for a reason. The adjudicators and music teachers who are listening to you want to see that you can shift. So that's something we'll work on here. The first shift occurs in measure 3. This is our dotted quarter note measure. So here we have... So first, let's just talk about the mechanics of the shift. We're going from first position to third position. So imagine that we're just thinking about the notes B to D. This, even though we're shifting from C natural to D, we should really be thinking about the first finger, because this is what's actually moving here. The second finger is sort of inconsequential to the shift itself. So the way I would practice this is actually going back to the B and then shifting really nice and slowly. Now let's talk about the actual act of shifting, because this is important, and it may be something that at the junior high level we haven't done a ton of yet, and that's okay. This is a good time to start. So when we shift up to third position, so first, second, or third, all of this remains the same. I like to think of it just like a train on the train tracks, moving up, moving down. Importantly, from this side, you'll see the thumb stays the same, right? Okay, so when we are shifting up from B to D, I want you to practice just this, sort of isolated from anything in the music. B, let off the finger pressure, so you get that nice glassy sound. And then add the finger pressure back in. Try shifting really slowly so you can test, do I really have control over everything? Is there anything weird going on here? Am I changing my hand shape? Am I losing track of things? It's going to be important that you have a good setup here so that you're not supporting the instrument with your hand, but the hand is able to just move freely without squeezing against the neck. Because if you're squeezing against the neck, it's going to be impossible to make that shift, right? So you want everything to be nice and free here. We want to be rotated enough so that we're not squeezing our hand against the neck, but there's a little space, a little bit of a sort of peephole that we can look through there. And that way we can shift freely and with ease. So once we practice this B to D shift, just the act of going from first position to third position, it's going to be important for us to add the note back in that we've been deleting, which is the C natural. One thing that's important is because this is under a slur, we're going to want to let off on the finger pressure. That way we don't end up with a crazy glissando or portamento in there. I mean, maybe that's to your taste, but I think maybe we want to hide it just a little bit more than that. The other thing we can do is be a little bit sneaky with the bow. We can let off a little bit on the bow weight to hide that shift, and we can slow the bow down just ever so slightly. Even though this is under a crescendo, so you want to be careful with that. And make sure it sounds like things are continuously moving. If you can hear the shift a little bit, I think that's okay. I tend to like to hear shifts. Different people will have different opinions on that, so listen to your teacher. But for my taste, I'm okay with hearing the shift just a little bit. But we don't want it to be super schmeary. We're not Fritz Chrysler after all. All the other shifts are kind of the same. So once you practice that first position to third position, I think you're going to be set for the shifts. Just remember to follow all the markings as they are in your part. One last left hand thing. This piece has a lot of broken fifths. So these aren't fifths where you actually have to play them as a double stop. Like that, thankfully. That would be kind of crazy. But we do have to hop over from one first finger to another first finger, or from one third finger to another third finger. These are treacherous. It's really easy to be out of tune on these. So the first example comes in measure 2, where we have B, E. So remember, where we are on a string is controlled by our arm, sort of led by our elbow there. A less extreme version of this is in our left elbow, where we are controlling which string we are on. So when I'm going from B to E, I'm pivoting just a little bit. And what that's doing is it's helping me hop back and forth and end up on the same place in the string. Because if I don't do that, I end up being a little bit out of tune, and we want to avoid that if we can. So this is something to practice, maybe with a tuner. The other tricky thing is this is under a slur. It's possible to hold the fifth, but that's a little bit more advanced, probably going to be a little bit challenging for you to do if you're holding both at the same time. And I don't know that it's totally necessary. So I would just focus on hopping and try to anticipate it with your left hand a little bit so that the slur does not sound like a hook. Okay, now for the really fun part. The bow. Now, of course, there's shifting, there are all sorts of left-hand things to think about in this piece, but mostly this is about the bow and about the dynamics. Where are you in the bow? This is something that I wrote in my music. I wrote W-I-B, where in bow, many times, because we have to figure out where in the bow we need to be to create the dynamic, to create the sound that we want. Another important term, bow distribution. How much bow should we use? Where should we be in the bow? Not everything is just equal, right? So different note values at different dynamic lengths are going to require different amounts of bow and different places in the bow, different parts of the bow. Now, 3 bow variables I want you to think about. Number 1, weight. How much arm weight is being transferred through the arm, through the bow, and into the string. Lighter, heavier. Our arm is really heavy, so all the time we're kind of just holding the weight out of it. So you can just let the weight go. You don't have to worry about pressing. You can just let the natural arm weight transfer into that string, okay? Second bow variable, speed. Fast bow versus slow bow. Again, create a different sound. Also, you're going to be spinning more sound off if you're using a faster bow. So it's going to be a little bit louder, a little bit more vibrant. Next one, contact point. Where are we between the bridge and the fingerboard? The fingerboard is going to have a slightly different timbre. It's going to be a little bit softer. The bridge is going to be more focused sound and louder. Okay? We're going to start out near the middle of the bow. We've just finished up with this up bow on the E. Now we're at the frog, okay? So now we're at forte, we're already at the frog. All we have to do is go down bow. Notice that I am not using very much bow on those 8th notes. That I'm just right at the tip. So just use enough weight to make a good sound, but there's no reason to try to use the whole bow on an 8th note, and that's going to carry through the whole rest of this piece. There again. Diminuendo. So as we're getting softer, we're moving away from the bridge and we're taking weight away from the string, right? Diminuendo on a down bow. Bow, we don't need to get all the way to the frog because what's coming next is piano. is forte. So keep that volume up, keep it going. It's going to be tempting to kind of let off the gas, but just keep it nice and steady. So then what happens? We have fortissimo. This should sound bigger than anything you've played so far, right? So we're going to want to move our contact point closer to the bridge, use a good amount of weight. Diminuendo. Pianissimo, nothing. So feel free to get over the fingerboard. We can be a little bit what's called tasto, sol tasto over the fingerboard. And after you finish this, and 32, you're in an up bow. You can stay on the bow for that down bow. You can either stay there and do that, which would probably be preferable, but if you need to lift, just make sure you lift, set, go. You don't want to come from the air, right? Because that you have a bouncing bow. So at the end there, if you do need to lift, it's okay, but better just to go down, down, if possible. All right, I hope this was somewhat helpful to you. If you need any additional help or just want to chat about an evening song or the junior high auditions, feel free to contact me through my website or in the comments down below. Otherwise, I wish you the very best of luck and happy practicing.